Hey, this is Dr. Liberty, and we're going to go over organic and inorganic molecules. So I'm going to share my screen and we're going to go to the PowerPoint. It doesn't really matter what's on this PowerPoint. It's just kind of a guideline for us on things to talk about. And then I'll also go to a whiteboard too, if that helps a little bit. But let's talk about organic versus inorganic. The easiest way to separate those two is that if you're looking at the chemistry, the chemical signature of this, then organic is going to have carbon and hydrogen. And the easiest way to remember that is carbohydrates are one of our organic organic molecules, and that carbon, hydrate, hydrogen can just kind of help you remember that. So let's talk the shorter list is the organic molecules, carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, and nucleic acids. If you think food, then those are the main organic molecules. Our inorganic molecules that are important to pay attention to are going to be water, which water is hydrogen and oxygen, right? Oxygen itself, because it comes as a molecule, is O2. Carbon dioxide, which is CO2, and then salt. Obviously, they're inorganic salts. Salt in this case is a chemistry term, not a cooking term. So let's talk about salt for a second. If we have an ion, we have something that we put into water and it's going to dissociate into its two components. That is typically called a salt. So we have sodium chloride, which is our NaCl. We can have calcium chloride. We can have magnesium chloride. Any of those things that chemically are two or more portions, and then they're going to separate out. That's going to give us those ions that our body is going to need. So you see here a list: sodium, chlorine, that should be an L, not an I, capital C, lowercase l, potassium, calcium, magnesium. These are all really important ions that you'll find in the body. And so we consume them as salt, where they're attached to something, and then they're going to separate out and dissolve into the fluids and act as those individual ions. So organic, inorganic, really, it's not a food term, okay? It is a chemistry term. So that carbon, hydrogen, or it's not. If it has carbon and hydrogen, it's organic, right? It's as simple as that. And you're like, well, am I going to have to start looking at all of the signatures of these things? No, just kind of learn these two. So if I go back to this first slide, this is 39 of the ones that are posted right now. This last line right here, the carbohydrate, protein, lipid, like learn that and then learn this, and you should be okay for right now. Okay, this is not a chemistry course, it's just a chemistry chapter that is important for the things that are in our bodies. So water is important. Why is that important? We're just mentioning here that it is inorganic. It does not have carbon and hydrogen, and that is really important in the body and for how the body functions. Oxygen, obviously we know we need that. Why do we need oxygen, by the way? What is the purpose of oxygen? Not to breathe. That's what everybody says. I asked this in a class full of 40 or however many people, and everyone goes, oh, to breathe, you need it to breathe. No, you don't. You breathe to get it. We need oxygen because when we bring it in, we put it into our blood, we take it to our cells. The cells need oxygen in order to efficiently make ATP. And then carbon dioxide is a waste product from that then gets taken out. Okay, so you don't need it to breathe, you breathe to get it. All right, carbon dioxide and then the salts, we kind of covered that. Organic molecules. So if we do, I tell you not to think about food because we're not in the grocery store discussing organic and inorganic. We're in chemistry class. But when we come to organic, or we're in chemistry chapter, when it comes to organic, this is our food items, okay? Not organic food like you're paying more for it in the grocery store, but these are food items. So carbohydrates are one of the key organic molecules. We use these primarily for energy, but we can also use some of it to build up portions of our cell. We need little glucose add-ons to certain areas. We use those for identifiers. So we don't have eyes on our cells, but we do have different things chemically. Part of that is a glucose molecule. So these are your sugars. Monosaccharide and disaccharide are things that taste sweet. And then our complex carbohydrates are our starches and our fibers. And those are things that don't taste sweet, but they will break down to glucose in our digestive system. Okay, so this is just a picture of what it looks like. You don't have to stress out over this because I'm not going to give these to you and ask you what they are. But glucose and the other 6 carbon sugars have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The other way you can draw that out is here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then here's one hanging off. Anywhere there's a bend in organic chemistry, we could draw it this way very simply and understand there's a carbon and it has certain things attached to it. So a monosaccharide is 1, this is glucose, okay? A disaccharide, di means 2, and then a polysaccharide is just lots and lots and lots. Think like Legos, we're just building them up, okay? Then we have lipids. Lipid is our fat family. So we're gonna change completely. We still have carbon, we still have hydrogen, we still have oxygen, but it's gonna be in a different setup. So here, how many carbons before? We had 6, right? And it was in a ring. Now we're in these long chains. So these are fatty acids. A triglyceride looks like an E. It has a glycerol backbone. It actually is half of a sugar. So it's 3 carbons. And it has these long fatty acid chains, well, short, medium, or long, coming off of it. Okay, so that's what a lipid looks like. It acts completely different from a carbohydrate, even though it has all the same constituents. Like if I give you flour and sugar and butter, how many different ways could you put that together, right? That's when we take carbon and hydrogen and oxygen, it's how we put them together that's going to dictate what we get. So what's in the lipid family? Phospholipids, triglycerides, this is fats that you eat. Why do we need them in the body? Because they serve function mostly in building things like our cell membranes. We also have a lot of hormones that are fat-based, steroid-based, and so that's going to be super important. So our cell membranes, hormones that travel around. This is also an energy source if we need to. There's really vital reasons to have this stuff in our body. It talks chemically about saturated versus unsaturated. All that means, if it's saturated, it means that there's single bond. Every carbon has to have 4 things surrounding it. And so every single carbon will have 4 things, and there'll be hydrogens that are completely covering that. If it's unsaturated, then it'll have 4 bonds, but one of them will be a double bond. Instead of being saturated with hydrogen, the carbons that are next to each other link to each other instead of linking out to other hydrogens. It's not good or bad. We don't use those terms here. It's simply the chemical makeup of what's happening here. Okay, there are reasons to consume saturated and unsaturated fatty acids. We don't label or completely ignore one or the other. So phospholipid, so triglyceride is the 3, right? Triglyceride. The phospholipid is more like a circle with 2 fatty acids hanging off of it. So here's the phosphate group area, and then here's those fatty acids that are hanging off. And then we also have steroids, and this is more of a ring as opposed to these long chains. And again, have really, really, really vital functions in the body, especially for hormones and messengers and cell membrane structure. Right, and then we get to proteins. Hopefully we've all heard of protein, but these are mainly structural materials. Again, we can use them as energy sources, but structural material, hormone receptors, a lot of variety of function in the body for how these guys are supposed to work. Again, we still have carbon, we still have oxygen, we still have hydrogen, and then we're going to have a unique group, and it's also going to have an amino group. That's why they're called amino acids, this NH2. So we still have the same foundation. We have carbon and hydrogen and oxygen. It's just a matter of what else we put with it to get something. If we added chocolate to that flour and sugar and water, right, we'd get something different. So that's kind of what's happening here. When we put those amino acids together, so an amino acid, let's get to a different picture. An amino acid is like a letter in the alphabet. There are 20 something different, there's 26 different letters, there's like 20 different amino acids. And so if you take all those amino acids, it's how many you put together and the order that's going to dictate the protein that you get. So just doing a gloss over here, I want you to read further into this, but we have to link those amino acids together, just like we put letters together in a word. Then they're going to bend or fold or twist back on each other. And that's going to help determine how the protein actually does its job. So if you look at the picture version of this, so here's just our chain of amino acids, like letters in a word. And then those things are going to naturally kind of fold back or bend back on each other and form what's called the tertiary, ultimately form the tertiary shape here. And then this functionally has spots that something can bind to or connect with or recognize to serve its function in the body. Collagen is an example of a protein, and its structure is actually 3 chains of amino acids that end up twisting around almost like a braid around each other. And so it's a very structural protein as opposed to something like this. This looks almost like hemoglobin, and this is a functional protein. It's going to have a job, so it's going to have to attach to things. It's going to have these areas that stick out, so there's an attachment point, as opposed to collagen that's structural and it's just supposed to be part of the tissues. Okay, and the nucleic acids are the last one. Again, carbon and hydrogen and oxygen, and then some other parts. And the Na, nucleic acid, is what makes up DNA and RNA. So that's the instructions. It's actually the instructions for building those proteins. It's how they know, how the RNA or how the ribosomes know what order to put those amino acids into. All right, so hopefully that helps out a little bit. We won't go past that, but hopefully that helps out a little bit and gives you a little more insight into what you're looking at here. Don't make it harder than it is, okay? Just understand what makes it organic versus inorganic. Get that short list of what's in that category and then go from there. Don't get bogged down. Go back to those like learning objective things and answer those questions, okay? If you just answer those questions, you'll feel much more prepared. If you're reading through all this material, you're going to get bogged down and overwhelmed. All right, that video was requested. If you have other things, topics that you want me to go over, shoot me an email. I'm always happy to do that, okay?